Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Never a dull moment with Joseph Parker's promoter David Higgins, who has now publicly made up with Team Fury and now turned his gaze and attention to blasting Eddie Hearn. So you might recall earlier this week, Higgins went absolutely off his nut at Peter Fury at the first Joseph Parker Hughie Fury Fight Week press conference over the referee for the 23rd September fight. He was thrown out and then subjected to an expletive-laden tirade from Peter Fury himself. It was great viewing, it really, really was. Certainly the best promotion this fight has had thus far. Column inches galore in the media and all over the sports bulletins and websites. So all of a sudden, there were a lot more eyes on the build-up. And I was half expecting he would go full-on Derek Chisora at the final press conference which has now been held. But alas, unfortunately not. But something just as strange occurred. Higgins changed tack and started having a verbal love-in and waxing lyrical about the Furies. So let's get into what he actually said. He started by saying the Furies have proved a lot of people wrong by putting on the fight. They proved everyone wrong by putting the fight money in the bank, and the Furies didn't break their word. Unlike Eddie Hearn, who pulled out a meeting a New Zealand tour group Duco had arranged and brought over for the fight. So he then brought one of Hearn's fighters into it as well, Tony Bellew, saying how he sat across from Bellew 2 months ago and couldn't get a word in edgewise, and was basically subjected to Bellew shouting at him for half an hour about how the Parker-Fury fight would not happen. The Furies wouldn't go through with it. So he added at the end, Blowhard Bellew, and that's what he called him, Blowhard Bellew has some egg on his face. So pretty interesting stuff. I'll get to that in a second in terms of my thoughts, but he also said in respect of his earlier performance at the first press conference where he was thrown out of, he admitted that it was a performance. He wanted to get noticed. He wanted impact. Because that referee issue had been getting no traction behind closed doors over a period of 4 weeks and many hours of lobbying the British Boxing Board of Control. So I was pretty sure that that was the case the other day when it happened, and I dropped a couple of videos over a couple of days as things were developing. So a card to each, I'm putting it up on screen now, so if you want to go check those out, have a look. I think, and it's proven that it was a very clever communication strategy executed to a T. So Higgins has owned up to it. So he's not as dumb as a lot of people were making him out to be. But in terms of the other stuff about Hearn and Bellew, as with the performance the other day, I fully believe that there's a purpose to it. I mean, sure, Hearn may have stood up the tour group, but Higgins is using it as a hook. A hook to start a little bit of beef to lay the groundwork for a potential Parker fight with Bellew, should Parker beat Fury. Remember, a couple of months ago, Higgins was waxing lyrical about Hearn and the potential to set up a big money fight with one of his fighters, either Dillian Whyte or Tony Bellew. Hearn even said he was going to be sending Higgins some offers to consider the week that they met. Obviously, I'm sure it would be dependent on Parker getting past Fury, because if Parker doesn't hold the belt, well, he's got no value. He is a commodity with the strap around his waist. So for me, Higgins now needs to put a little bit of distance between himself and Hearn, because what may come. And just remember, he's already got his point across about the referee, got some attention for the fight, so there's no reason to carry on the beef with the Fury. So he's drawn a line under it and he's moved on. And, he's being a smart promoter here. He's waxing lyrical and sort of making it look like everything's okay now. But in terms of the Hearn stuff, I mean, people expect that there's going to be a little bit of at each other's throats. So he's just setting up what a lot of fans would expect anyway. And consider this for a second. And this is a scenario I've been mulling over in recent days, and I even ran this by Kiwi Box. Don't you think that it's strange that Dillian Whyte is not confirmed on the Joshua Pulev undercard 5 weeks out from fight night. Or that Tony Bellew has not signed the rematch with David Haye, even though terms have apparently been agreed according to Haye. And Haye is publicly lobbying Bellew to sign and get that fight underway for December, whatever day in December it was going to be. So my view here is that Hearn and his two fighters, they are waiting to see what happens between Paker and Fury. And should Paker win, who does he choose out of Bellew and White? Paker has already stated a preference for Bellew, but I suspect that's because it's the potentially easier fight, it's lower risk, and high reward. I think a Dillian White fight's probably a better money fight, but it would be pretty close, pretty even I would imagine. So it wouldn't shock me that if Paker wins, and bear with me here, that it's announced that Paker is to fight either Bellew or White in December. So that announcement, if he does get a win, could come pretty quickly after the Fury fight. So Paker has openly spoke about wanting to fight again this year, probably December. So just consider that possibility in everything we've seen. Don't you think it's strange Dillian White isn't confirmed on the undercard yet? It would explain why they lowballed Lucas Brown, because they want to keep the options open. And remember, should Paker end up going the Bellew route, White can just fight Helenius. That is the backup option, and it looks like it's already in place. And Bellew, well, we know he wants a shot at Joseph Paker. We know he wants a title shot. And just think, it's a pretty decent gamble for him. He thinks Paker is potentially beatable. He's not Anthony Joshua, is what Bellew has said. He doesn't think Paker would hit as hard. He's similar dimensions, so he doesn't think he's completely out of it. Plus, if he loses, does he really lose? He's still got the Haye rematch there if he wants it. So he could have 2 fights. And it doesn't matter if he has the belt or not. He'll still get paid either way. So just consider the possibility of what I'm saying, what I've been mulling over before you start trashing it, because I think there is something in it. I also noted from the ticket sales update from Mick Hennessy at the press conference, they're only now expecting 8,000 in total as a maximum. Previously, the expectation had been potentially up to 10,000. So if they're now saying 8,000, well, it could be certainly quite a few less than that. We know they'd sold 5 as of the other day, but he didn't give an exact update at the moment, just saying, people have been buying tickets and it's growing every day. But if it's still under that 8,000, well, who knows where it will go. He also reiterated and I really do think it's a BS line, that no one was expecting to pack out stadiums with this fight. Well, you don't know if you didn't try, and you can't expect to sell out a stadium or even close to 10,000 tickets in basically only 2 weeks of furious, frenetic promotional work. You got to have a much longer lead-in time, especially with Fury. He's the home fighter, but he's barely known in Manchester and wider in England. And Joseph Paker, obviously, he's the champion, but he's been fighting away from the eyes of boxing fans. So he's got a profile among hardcore boxing fans, but the casual fan, not really. So more work needed to be done if they really wanted to boost ticket sales. But it looks like they just didn't decide to put the effort in, and broadcasting rights only announced a couple of weeks out from the fight. So it's one of those things, I think you end up getting what you end up get if you only put a certain amount of work in. And this is a good example of that, I think. And I would also note, I'm not seeing much of anything about the undercard anywhere really. No one is talking about it. I mean, how many stories have you seen really going into any depth about any of those fights? I mean, that certainly tells me what we've all been thinking and saying for a while. They've misfired badly with who they put on the undercard. It's almost like it was put together as an afterthought, for the cheapest amount of money. I have no idea how much it cost, but, I mean, look at some of the names. I'm sure there's some decent fighters, but it is a world title fight undercard. I think we could have expected some better and bigger fights on the card. I'm sure it'll end up being an entertaining sort of card overall, but maybe not some of the guys that we could have expected to see. Okay, that's it from me. Hit like, subscribe, drop a comment. Do you think I'm being unfair about the undercard? Because I don't. I think it's basically trash. I can see why they're giving it away free, because hardly anyone wants to pay for it. And let's face it, these guys are going to be fighting in front of basically no one for most of the time in the build-up to the main event. I mean, a lot of people are only going to come to those seats in that, half an hour before the main event. So it's going to be a bit tragic for them, basically fighting in front of a massive stack of empty chairs. It's a bit sad. Okay, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. Make sure you drop a comment. I'm out.